It's a lovely day and I'm going to sit in the sun. But first, we're going to look at clutches, in particular clutch covers, and got a few to look at here, talk you through them. So the clutch cover is what mostly gives the capacity of the clutch. That's the main feature, the clamp force applied by the cover onto the friction disc. There isn't much choice, as always with the Daihatsu. Limited options, but then they can be modified as well. So, starting from here, we have the standard factory fitted clutch. Flipping phone, wish it would focus. There we are. Now I've put some values here in terms of clamp force in kilograms, and then also the estimated torque figure that it will hold in terms of the flywheel torque. So this is the factory cover. It's made by XZD, how do you want to say it? DHC 511 is the code. 180 millimeters is the diameter of the Daihatsu clutch. I'm sure you've all seen these. If you've ever looked at a GTi clutch, you've probably seen one of these. They're the most common looking cover. So it's 310 kilograms is the official rating in the technical manual. The diaphragm spring is held in with these bent over lugs. Very hard to dismantle. It would require bending the lugs and then bending them back, so it's not an easy cover to modify. If you were to change the diaphragm, or try to, then it would be or make a double diaphragm. Anyway, let's talk about the next option, which is Japanese again, NKK, and the code for that is NDS297. Now it is offered as a standard replacement clutch, but it is actually slightly more uprated than the standard item, and that's quite common in the aftermarket. They will produce a clutch that's just a little bit stronger than standard to guarantee no slip. This will hold around about 145 pounds-feet of torque. Now in my opinion it's a much better made item. The diaphragm is held in place with rivets. It's just a sturdier construction, and also the contact plate for the disc is the correct dimensions. And what I mean by that is it's 180 millimeters, of course, but the inner is just a little bit larger than standard. Whereas on the original, there's a whole chunk of extra material that's just not needed. The disc ends about here, and this extra bit is just a waste of weight. The reason for that is they use, well, there's different size discs for the different various models of car, and they're obviously just using a disc that this feature, that part of it is used on different models. Anyway, going back to this, so like I say, it is better made. can see how the diaphragm is held in with those rivets and these kind of, I don't know what you'd call them, but also the rivets for the straps are much thicker, heavier duty. Now we have the pink cover, and you've probably come across these or heard of these as well. So what it is the standard factory cover is then modified by the Australian XZE outfit, and you can see 540 kilograms. If you fit this as it is, 160 foot-pounds is about the limit. These figures I'm quoting are with a normal organic style friction disc. So what they do with this, they take it apart, not the diaphragm, that's exactly the same, that's left in place, and then they actually, I don't know if you can go see this very well, but there's a ring that's set in from the very edge of the diaphragm, and instead of sitting on the edge of the leg now, although it looks like it is, it's slightly, I'm not going to be able to show you this very easily, but that might be a bit better. But the diaphragm is now resting on that ring, and it's creating more force because you're changing what they call the pivot point of the clutch. So although it looks exactly the same as standard, it is the standard item, it's just been modified, focus again, and it gives around about 50% more clamp as it is. Now the reason I say that is because there's actually they have designed this clutch to work with a paddle type disc, which is thicker than an organic disc. Well, the ones they make are. Now if you fit this as it is, you don't actually get the max clamp that it will achieve. And you can modify the cover to give a little bit more clamp. And what that involves is, I've got one here. Now this was a pink cover, but I stripped the paint off. Oops. Let's move that one out of the way. You can see it is another modified pink. But, so the modification involves reducing the height of these lugs by about 1 millimetre, just under a millimetre. This material here, this is about 3 millimetres thick, and now the lug which mounts to the flywheel, you can see that it's been shaved down. So that makes the clutch, enables the clutch cover to clamp down further onto the flywheel and changes the position of the diaphragm spring slightly, gives it more clamp. So if you're using an organic disc with the pink, then that can help give a little bit more clamp. Let's put that back on. Now we've got shadows. Next is the Paolo version. Now Paolo is Italian, you've probably heard of him if you're on the forums or the Facebook group. Very good Italian engineer. His version of the modified cover, we called it the super cover, and it's taken the features of the pink but improving on their design there, and he's actually increased the distance there of the pivot point even more, with a supporting ring. He has cut down the plate here for some weight reduction, so that's the same as the factory disc, the width here. Bit of weight reduction on the edges as well, and you can see he's also balanced. There's some balancing here, some drillings to balance it. So this one is a slight upgrade again on the pink. And in terms of the single diaphragm covers, and again these, it's the factory cover modified, and that's, ooh, bubble wrap pop. So you can see 190 pounds-foot of torque. And these are limits. These aren't just sort of figures that, I'm not being conservative here, these are absolute limits really. And finally we have what we call the double diaphragm cover. Now this is the NKK again, but because it's easy to dismantle with those rivets, Paolo has, we've put two of the diaphragms stacked on top of each other, and you can see the well over the top support for the diaphragms there, with, they're not rivets but rather nice looking stainless fasteners, I think they are there, and these are actually spot welded, all these supports. So because there's two diaphragms, there's absolutely no need to modify or play with the pivot point. You can see that the legs are sitting on the edge of the diaphragm. You're effectively giving yourself double the clamp. Not quite double, but it works out that this is giving at least 700 kilograms of clamp and up to 240 pounds-foot of torque. So a huge amount of torque capacity, and that's even with a standard organic disc, which would drive nice. It would be a heavier pedal though when you push the clutch. I've never actually felt a pedal with one of these, never fitted one. This is mine for the future, but a few people have, and apparently it's not too bad. It's not like you're really struggling to push the clutch down. It's just, you know, because the clutch is quite light anyway, then two diaphragms isn't actually too bad. You might need to think about checking the clutch cable or having a spare cable to hand in case the cable snaps. In a worst case scenario, in theory, you're putting more force on that crankshaft when you push the clutch down, and you could promote some thrust washer or thrust bearing wear on the crank. But there's been no reports of any issues with that either. But really, if you want, you know, if you're producing or modifying an engine for some serious power, really the clutch cover clamp here is the best way to do it, because you can retain a nice organic smooth disc and still not worry about any slip. You're going to be well up to the point of breaking gearboxes by the time you cause these to slip. So that's another problem, of course, is the gearbox strength, which we all know is a bit weak. Now another video I will do once I've cleared this up and had a cup of tea is to look at the different discs you can get. So in terms of organic discs, they should all be very similar, but they are different companies, different construction. Some are definitely better than others in terms of their strength when you look at the hub and how it's assembled. So I'll do a video showing the different discs I have. But if you can't get hold of a pink You should be able to if you keep your eyes open, maybe even a used one, but it can certainly be restored to as new. But it is worth that modification to these lugs. Or alternatively, if you have a spare flywheel, perhaps you could use an original flywheel. So instead of taking the 1mm off the cover, you could actually take 1mm off this step where the clutch mounts, and that would have exactly the same effect for the clamp. This step height here is 23mm, but if you reduce that down to 22mm, you're going to achieve better clamp with a pink and an organic disc. Or alternatively, you could have an organic disc relined, slightly thicker, again about 1mm thicker, and it would give the same effect. It's going to get this diaphragm in the optimum position. And before I finish, I just suddenly thought I'll just show you this. I don't know why it occurs, but let's look at the factory one again. Of course, this is brand new. You can see it's new. When you place a straight edge over the pressure ring, as you would expect, that is perfectly flat. However, with the pinks, I've noticed that there's always this element of, well, it's not warp because it's new, but it's like a dish effect. Will the camera show it? Let's have a look. There we are. You can see that it's not actually sitting flat. So on this one, which is also this old new one that I've been playing around with, I'd actually started to rub it on my surface plate thing there to get it nice and flat. You can see the edges. The more I do, the more it works its way inwards to making it nice and flat. Takes a long time by hand, but so I don't know why that occurs with this modification. It's obviously to do with the way how this ring is resting. Really, you do want a nice flat surface, of course. Once the clutch is bedded in, then the friction material is going to take shape anyway. But it's certainly nice to start with something that should be flat. And another thing to show you on the Paolo version is he's stacked up 3. Oh, won't focus again. Come on. So here there's actually 3 thin strips, what they call the straps, rather than 2. It's done the same on the double diaphragm. When you think these are actually holding the force of that torque. Anyway, so I'll do another video in a bit showing, well, maybe in a few hours,